My blood work's normal, but I don't feel good. Have you ever been told that? Have you ever been to your doctor and they say, hey, your labs are normal, but you realize you don't feel well? Hi, I'm Dr. David Alonzo with Magnolia Health and Wellness. Let me tell you, I've heard that message many times, where the way I hear it is, Doc, can I get some blood work done to make sure that I'm healthy? Well, let's talk about labs for a moment. I get this question a lot. Most lab tests are really good at detecting disease, or particularly advanced or severe disease. But I'll tell you something, just because you get a normal test, that does not mean you're in your best health. And this is something that even doctors don't always understand. Just because on the lab it's listed as normal doesn't mean it's optimal. We want to separate normal from optimal. In fact, on average, from a health standpoint, it's often true that when we're normal or in the reference range, that's not ideal for us. So let's talk about one truth. You might go to the doctor and say, all right, let's do some routine blood work. You have your annual visit and we're going to get your routine labs. And then you hear that they're normal. Great, that means I'm in good health. Not so fast. Routine labs are not designed to pick up optimal health. Again, they're focusing on answering the question, are you in trouble? They're great for answering, do we have organ failure? Is our liver failing? Is our kidneys failing? Do we have advanced diabetes? But to take a step back and say, hey, am I living my best life? Am I right now in my best picture of health? No, routine labs will not tell us that. This is what I might call the normal but not well gap. Something to keep in mind, this gets into a little bit of the weeds of how lab results are calculated. When a lab gives you that reference range, they're simply basing it on averages in our population. So if we have a sick population, which in America many of us are sick, especially when it comes to obesity or prediabetes or even diabetes, that's going to be reflected in what is considered a normal lab value. But again, that's not optimal. So someone might come into me, say, I'm feeling tired. My focus isn't what it used to be. They're gaining weight more easily. Recovery is slower. You go to exercise, you don't get back quickly. Your sleep is not being restorative. They come get their normal routine labs and everything comes back normal. That's where the confusion begins. A doctor might say, you're fine. But biologically, that isn't always true. What I say sometimes is with biology, sometimes it whispers before it screams. We got to look at those more subtle measures, more subtle differences to get those clues to better sense of how do we prevent the disease from developing to where then you would have that abnormal lab test. Something I hate to consider, but really have to ask this question is, why does this gap exist in the first place? Unfortunately, in medicine, a lot of what we do has been dictated largely by large groups trying to come up with guidelines that are cost conscious, not always based on what is best for one's health. At a population level, if we look at what is recommended as part of a routine screening for someone in the middle of their life, let's say you're between 40 and 60 years old, and you're going to your doctor for routine blood work. If we look at what's recommended, the only screening tests that are encouraged nationally are screening for diabetes, screening for high cholesterol, and one-time screening for HIV and hepatitis. There's no screen for thyroid, no screen for anemia, no screen for micronutrient deficiencies, no screen for early inflammatory metabolic dysfunction. Again, only those end diseases, diabetes, high cholesterol, and certain infections. And I would argue that that's missing a lot of areas of opportunity that we can optimize our health. Again, these guidelines were really designed to be simple, cost-effective, and intended to be used across millions of people. And yeah, they work reasonably well when we're trying to catch late-stage disease. But if you're someone like me who wants to say, I don't just want to catch late-stage disease, I want to be in my best, optimal health. So what we look to is over the last decade, there's been some amazing advances in the science, in the medical research world and diagnostics, that really we have a lot of tools at hand that we did not have at our hands, at our fingertips, just 10 years ago, that give us the opportunity to truly detect at a more subtle, more cellular level, some of the disease processes that we can intervene with before the trouble begins. That brings me to a term I'd like to consider. One is this distinction between what we might call our chronological age versus our biological age. Chronological age, of course, is how old are you on the calendar? When were you born? Are you 40 years old? Are you 50 years old? But biological age represents how old is your body functioning? Are you functioning if you're 40 as a 40-year-old? Or when you're 40, are you functioning as a 65-year-old? I hope for most of us we want to aim it the other way around. When we're 65, we would rather be functioning like a biological 40-year-old. There are tools now where we can measure that in an accurate way. One of the tests that I particularly like is known as the pace of aging. Again, it's a cellular biological marker test that gives you a reflection of how is your biological clock running compared to the chronological clock. If we get a value of 1, that means we're exactly on par. For every 1 year we live, our biology has advanced by 1 year. Now, of course, I love to see the values when they're less than 1. If we get a 0.7, that means for every 1 year you age calendar-wise, your body has effectively only aged about 8 months. That's what we want to be shooting for, is when we get our pace of aging less than our chronological age. And those are metrics we can measure and then repeat in 3, 6, or 12 months, and we can check to see any recommendations or any changes that you might make in your life. We can see the impact in as few as 3 months on those measurements, which is exciting to get that feedback after you've made some serious and significant lifestyle changes. So the pace of aging, just to mention, can be influenced by a number of factors. That would include things like inflammation, our metabolic health, our sleep, our nutrition, our level of physical activity, or even just the stress that we're under. And beyond blood work, we wouldn't stop at blood work. There's also tools now. We know that the bacteria that live in our environment and live on us and in us are as important to our health as some of our own biological cellular functions. We call that the microbiome, particularly within our gut, has a major impact on our health and our wellness. And likewise, there are tools to measure our biological health from a cellular level. We have tools now that can effectively measure and quantify the bacteria that make up our microbiome. And not only just the presence of those bacteria, there's now ways to assess how they're affecting our body, how they're active, their activity level, and what impact that might have on our health. And there are tools that can further extrapolate that to give us pinpoint recommendations when it comes to nutrition or vitamin or micronutrient deficiencies that we might have that are further compounding the dysfunction of our microbiome, which again gives us tools, gives us actionable points where we can make a difference in your health and my health. Moving beyond just blood work and our microbiome, another big area of wellness that we can use, that we can assess using lab work, is cancer screening. Cancer screening, or cancer in general, has been a significant cause of mortality, death, or morbidity, just illness in our society, and it still sits up there as one of the leading causes of death. And in a sense, we haven't made that much impact overall, and I would argue that a lot of that is due to lack of screening. Sure, we have things like mammograms, colonoscopies, PSA tests, pap smears, all of which are designed to screen for cancer, but all of those tests together only detect less than 30% of the cancers that end up killing us. Meaning that 70% of cancers that we end up dying from are because we develop some symptom when it gets advanced enough to present itself. We don't have to accept that. There are, again, advancements in testing technology where we can detect those on a microscopic or cellular level long before there are ever symptoms. One of the tests that I particularly like is put out by a company called Grail, that they have some amazing data that was published just earlier this year where they looked at implementing their blood test in addition to those routine screening metrics, and they showed that they were able to increase the cancer detection rate by 3-fold. That is 3 times the amount of cancers were detected in the course of a year as compared to just what we have in our routine screening. To me, I would call that a failure of our routine screening if we're only picking up then less than 1/3 of what we could potentially pick up. Again, great tools that are out there that I would advocate to anybody to look into, talk to your doctor about availing yourself of. Tools that can not only detect things early, they can lead to saved lives. So ultimately with all of this, you can tell I'm passionate about blood work and screening, and I get disappointed and frustrated with our current medical paradigm, which really focuses on a few basic things, such as that diabetes, the cholesterol screening, and a few other very simple metrics. When we have the technology before us to really take a deeper dive into wellness, to optimize health, early cancer detection. Finding cancer early can lead to a 4 times higher likelihood of surviving cancer. That is a big difference, not just for a quarter or 25% more, but 4 times the likelihood of surviving from cancer. Unfortunately, a lot of these tests are not fully embraced by the medical society as a paradigm. Some of these things are not going to be covered by general health insurance. I look forward to the day when all of this is going to be accepted and embraced by the medical community at large. but I would encourage each of you to look at your needs and decide if these are things that you could take advantage of now. These might help you improve how you feel and how you function on a daily basis. Ultimately, the combination of all of these are really give us better tools with the engaged individual that can allow us to focus on not just avoiding disease, but really optimizing how you feel and how you function and how you age over time. Thank you for joining me in this video. In future videos, we'll take a closer look at some of these specific advanced technologies. We'll take a deeper dive into how some of these work. And if you want to learn more, reach out to us. I'd be happy to sit down for a consultation with you. Magnolia Health and Wellness in Chico, California.